And then Paul also goes on to Timothy, he says, preaching that rebukes. What's rebuke mean? Rebuke means to criticize or reprove sharply, to reprimand, to call them on the carpet. There is a time and a place to say, I'm not going to let you get away with this anymore. It's time when the rubber meets the road, I'm going to call you on what you're doing, it's wrong. And there's a time for that. And then he starts preaching that encourages, and I like this one. This is the one, encourage says, contribute to the progress of or growth of, to give courage, hope, or confidence, to hearten, to give support to. Your preaching should do that as well, you guys. So many people get caught up in that rebuke. And it's no wonder so many people fall away from the church. So it's important that we're saying and doing the right things. What's the old saying? It says, if we sort it out, if we stand up for everything, then you really don't count for anything. Too many people in this world just say, whatever, man. I stand up for it, it's okay. And then, of course, there's the old saying that says, if you don't stand up for something, you guys want to finish that for me? Then you'll fall for anything. And you see that happening too. Let's stand up for God. Let's do what Paul said to Timothy. Let's make sure that our preaching is pleasing to God because we're ever ready, in season and out. We're informed, we're consistent, we're correct, doctrinally sound. We rebuke when necessary, we encourage always, and we show patience. Now, contrast that with the preaching that displeases God. You say, wait, what is that? Well, it says in there, Paul said in there, he said, there's come a time when some will not endure sound doctrine. He said, I don't want to hear it. I've heard it for too long. I don't want to hear it anymore. It's old news. That happens too. And Paul warned them. And it's happening today. If you look around, it's happening all over the place. Now, some preachers get accused of this prosperity gospel. I personally don't see anything wrong with it as long as it's still doctrinally sound. We're going to talk just a little bit about that too. But the problem is, it says, they will hear things according to their own desires. Those things that justify their sinful behavior. And quite frankly, they will try to justify it. And I got to tell you guys something. I don't like to get into issues, but you read on the internet and it talks about this person's supporting that. And of course it's celebrities oftentimes, right? And they got this new cause going on. And you look at it and says, man, that flies right in your face with the Bible. But everybody embraces it. I'm not going to talk about anything specifically, but just check out Yahoo. You'll see it. It's right there in your face. And we just go on and go on and go on with it. And that might be a time when Paul says, it's time to review. Say that's wrong. And then you encourage them to do the right thing. So unsound doctrine is one. Also, preaching just to entertain is something that displeases God. That's what Paul meant when he says about people who have itching ears. They want to hear something that's going to make them feel good. And boy, if you can deliver that, they're going to listen. Even if it's not sound doctrine. Man, I felt good today when I went to church. I feel really, what'd you learn? I felt good today when I went to church. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with feeling good and entertaining. In fact, I think you need to do it. I think church should be entertaining. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But if I stood up here every Sunday and my goal was just to entertain you guys and make you laugh with a few jokes, first of all, I'd fall flat on my face because I'm not good at that. But if I did, if I tried to do that, even if I was good at it, I would be doing you a tremendous disservice. We need to walk out of here today, or every service, with something you can, some meat you can grab a hold of. You can go out, maybe change your life, and then in turn help affect someone else's life. Now, I think, though, it's very important that we're somewhat entertainable here. I will absolutely debate that to the end of time. I think that's why Basic Truth is formed. You've got to entertain people. We try to do it with the music. We try to pick music that's fun and uplifting. We try to pick music that's worshipful, that gets right into the heart. We try to give messages that keep your attention. We try to engage. You should do all those things. Your church should have fellowship activities that make it fun for people to want to be part of it. Rick Warren, pastor of Saddleback Church and the author of Purpose-Driven Life, says, some people actually think they failed in their preaching if people enjoy the message. If they're too comfortable, I must have failed. I didn't stir them enough. In a Gallup poll a few years ago, the unchurched listed church as the most boring place to be. I believe it. I've been in some churches like that for me. Now, how do we change that, guys? I think the best way we change it is we look at Jesus. We say, how did he do it? The old WWJD, right? That reminds me of a story. There's a guy that went into a store one day, and he was in a gift shop, and he had these religious items, and he sees these hats, and they say WWJD on them. And he says to the clerk, he said, what's WWJD? I mean, he's just back in his brain. He can't think of what this means. She says, well, that means, what would Jesus do? WWJD, what would Jesus do? And she says, what it means is, the idea there is people read that, and maybe instead of making a quick, rash decision, they reflect and think, okay, what would Jesus do in this situation? And then you try to do that. And he thinks for a moment, and he says, you know what? I don't think Jesus would pay $17.95 for his hat. And he laid it back on the rack, and he walked away. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I think the concept is good, right? What would Jesus do? You get in a situation, you're angry, and you stop for a moment and say, what would Jesus do? How would he handle it? That's how I should handle it. And that's exactly how we should treat ourselves when we're here in the mornings doing our worship. Our messages should reflect how Jesus was the best preacher of all time. He was awesome. He was so effective. And look how he did it. Jesus preached the good news. He began with people's needs and their hurts and their interests. Our basic message to the lost must be good news, people. It's got to be good news first. If it isn't, they're not going to come back. The world is full of bad news. We don't need any more of that. So Jesus' message was good news. The gospel is about what God has done for us and what we can become in Christ. That's what people have to realize when they're sitting in those seats. And when they're talking to you, sitting across from you at your workplace, at the restaurant, or at your house, wherever it may be. What can I become and what can they become in Christ? You need to help them to see that. You see, crowds always flock to good news. And I'll tell you something else. Because preachers and Christians are called to communicate truth, we often mistake this with believing that people want to hear the truth. They don't. Most of the time, people don't want to hear the truth. In fact, surveys say that in America, we're getting farther and farther away from wanting to hear the absolute truth. We don't want the absolute truth. We don't like it. Our itching ears want to hear something different. And that's the source for a lot of our problems. We don't value truth anymore. What's it say? Proclaimers of truth don't get much attention in a society that devalues truth. So if you go out there and you think, by golly, I'm doing the right thing here. I'm going to tell them like it is. Because it's in the Bible. God says I can do it. And I'm going to tell them Henry just like it is. They won't like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to tell them that. And then you wonder why they walk away and you didn't get to it. They're not going to value truth. They don't really want to hear truth. So how do you reach them? How did Jesus reach them? He met their needs first. Does that make sense to you guys? Most believers aren't looking for truth. They're looking for relief. They're hurting in some way and they want relief from that pain. Jesus knew this. That's why he reached them and he met their needs first. And then after he meets their needs, they say, you know what? I want to know more about that man. And when they want to know more about that man, guess what they learn? The truth. So when you're talking to someone and we're giving a message in here, we need to know what the needs are. And we need to meet those needs. And then they want to hear the truth. And that's exactly how it worked. Jesus was the master storyteller. And he was so good at that. In Ephesians 4:29 it says, speak only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who